Hello everyone, I'm Justin, and this is a full recap of Shazam, released in 2019. If you end up enjoying this video and want to see more from us, then make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to know anytime we upload a new video. The DCEU, by and large, was a pretty disastrous attempt at building a cinematic universe akin to what Marvel managed to do with their superhero properties. And this failure set back DC films for years, with them just now starting to recover as they try to half-reset the DCU. But despite their many failures, there were a few highlights throughout their slate of releases from 2013 to 2022, with one of their best being 2019's Shazam. Although Shazam's gained plenty of acclaim from critics and audiences alike, the film unfortunately performed the worst at the box office out of any DCEU theatrical release not affected by the pandemic, with it grossing $365 million worldwide, which is still a great number, but I'd expect the sequel Shazam: Fury of the Gods to do better when it releases in a few weeks on March 17th. So, in preparation for the new film, today we're going to take a look back at the first Shazam, which you should go watch if you haven't already, as it'll be linked in the description. But if you have seen it and are just looking for a quick refresher, then you've come to the right place. The movie opens in 1974, upstate New York, as a young boy named Thaddeus Sivana travels to his grandfather's house in a car with his older brother Sid and their father, while playing with a magic 8-ball, which his family continuously teases him about. As he's playing though, the toy appears to begin glitching, showing 7 different symbols, before he then finds himself alone in the vehicle, moving at faster and faster speeds, and ending up inside a mysterious cave called the Rock of Eternity, where he's met by a wizard named Shazam, the last of the Council of Wizards sworn to protect the realms from the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. Shazam explains that, as the years have passed, he's grown weak, so he now seeks a champion to inherit his magic. But in order for him to choose Thaddeus as his champion, he first must demonstrate that he's pure of heart and strong in spirit. So the 7 deadly sins begin to tempt him, claiming they can give him even greater power if he takes the Eye of Sin. So he reaches out towards it, forcing Shazam to zap him with his staff and deem him unworthy before transporting him back to the car with his family, which prompts Thaddeus to whine and complain, and the commotion ultimately causes their father to crash and fly out the windshield, being severely injured in the process, and Sid shouts at and blames Thad for this, while Thad sees a message on his 8-ball that reads, "Find us." Meanwhile, back in the Rock of Eternity, the 7 deadly sins acknowledge Shazam's growing weakness, and that soon he won't be able to contain them. So Shazam uses a seeking spell to find a soul that's worthy. It doesn't seem he's been able to find that soul in the next 45 years though, as we're now taken to present-day Philadelphia to meet a boy named Billy Batson, as he lures some police officers into a pawn shop and locks them inside so he can use their police computer to search for the home address of Rachel M. Batson, one of many Batsons that he's tracked down in hopes that one would turn out to be his mother, who he's been searching for ever since they got separated while at a carnival when he was a little kid. But upon arriving at the woman's home, it turns out to once again not be his mother. He's then picked up by the cops and taken to meet with a social worker, who, despite the fact that he's now run away from foster homes in 6 counties, has found another couple that runs a group home willing to take him in. So he heads home with said couple, Victor and Rosa Vasquez, and they introduce him to the rest of the kids: Eugene, Darla, Mary, Pedro, and Freddie, the latter of whom he'll be sharing a room with and who we learn is a huge fan of superheroes, specifically Superman. The couple also enrolls Billy into school with the other kids, but he mostly tries to avoid them throughout the day, despite Freddy's attempts to get to know him, and he even continues to avoid them when Freddy's attacked by a couple of bullies, Brett and Burke Breyer, although he does eventually decide to help after they begin making fun of Freddy for not having a mom, and he attacks them with Freddy's walking crutch, prompting them to chase him into the subway, but he manages to make it onto a train just before they can catch him. While on the train though, it begins showing the same symbols Thaddeus saw in the flashback earlier, before Billy suddenly finds himself transported into the Rock of Eternity. Throughout all this going on with Billy, we saw that Thaddeus, now working for his father's company, Sivana Industries, has begun funding a project he claimed was to study mass hysteria, but in actuality was to find a way back to the Wizard's Cave. And through a video from one of his clients of her experience, he's learned that he could return through a doorway with the 7 symbols written on it 7 times. So he did just that, and once back in the cave, he confronted an even weaker Shazam and grabbed hold of the Eye of Sin, which then released the 7 deadly sins, who entered the ball and gave Dr. Sivana use of their power by entering his right eye. And he then used said power to incapacitate Shazam. So the wizard has now transported Billy here and explains to him that inside of the Rock of Eternity, there are 7 thrones for 7 wizards, who long ago chose a champion to inherit their powers. But that champion unfortunately ended up using their power for revenge and released the 7 deadly sins onto the world, resulting in millions of lives being lost. So since then, the wizard vowed to never pass on his magic until he found one truly good person, and he believes that person is Billy, who despite disagreeing with the wizard, grabs hold of his staff and says Shazam to allow his power to flow through him, transforming him into his full potential. The wizard then turns to dust and crumbles to the ground, before Billy's transported back onto the train in his superhero form. Billy, having no clue what to do about any of this, then heads back home and finds Freddy, hoping he can help him understand this superhero stuff. And Freddy, after having him prove he actually is Billy, helps him learn to control some of his power, which they learn includes electrokinesis, hyperspeed, and super strength, which he later uses to help a woman being mugged, but accidentally ends up scaring her as well, so she gives them some money in exchange for not hurting her. And with their newly acquired cash, as well as his now adult face, Billy heads to a gas station to buy some alcohol. As they're looking at what to buy though, a couple of men in masks enter and attempt to rob the cashier, so Billy goes to stop them, but ends up getting shot for his efforts. The bullet doesn't penetrate his skin though, since he also has bullet immunity, so he's easily able to take the 2 men out before leaving with some snacks and heading back home with Freddy. But once there, he's quickly spotted by a still awake Darla, so he tries to explain how he encountered a wizard named Shazam, but upon saying his name again, he's reverted back to his kid form, which helps in gaining Darla's trust, and she promises to not tell anyone. Back to Dr. Sivana now though, as the next morning, he returns to Sivana Industries to confront his father, who's now paralyzed from the waist down as a result of the accident all those years ago, while he's in a meeting with the company's board members, which includes Thad's brother Sid, who Thaddeus launches out the window before unleashing the 7 deadly sins on the rest of the board, leaving just his father alive so he can gloat about his unequal amount of power. But his gloating soon interrupted, as the sins inform him that the wizard has chosen his champion, so he leaves greed to kill his father while he exits in search of said champion. Billy and Freddy, meanwhile, have continued testing Billy's superhuman abilities over the next several days, all the while documenting their experiments and uploading them to YouTube, which helps Billy's Shazam form rise in popularity. Freddy starts getting a little too comfortable with his new superhero best friend though, as after being bullied again by the Brayers, he informs them of his friendship with the hero and claims he'll bring him to lunch the next day, which upsets Billy since they agreed to keep his relationships hidden in case he encountered a supervillain. This leads to an argument between the two during dinner with the rest of their family that night, although they don't make it obvious to everyone else what they're arguing about. And as a result of their argument, Billy decides to not show up at lunch the next day, so he can instead take photos with random fans. And while he's out and about, he ends up saving a young girl from nearly being hit by a truck, who turns out to be Mary, and he accidentally calls her by name, but is mostly able to cover up the slip-up. He then gets back to showing off his powers to civilians, before later being confronted by Freddy, who was left to get beat up by the Brayers once again. But Billy claims he has more serious responsibilities now, while showing off his electrokinesis. But while doing so, he ends up inadvertently taking out a bus's tires on the bridge, nearly resulting in it crashing to the ground. But Billy's fortunately able to catch it and land it safely. His stupidity though is called out by Freddy, who claims he's turned into nothing more than a show-off and a bully, before storming off. And as he exits, Billy's then met and attacked by Dr. Sivana, who drags him by the throat all the way up into the sky before attempting to drop him to the ground. But Billy fortunately manages to avoid crashing thanks to his ability to fly. Still, he continues to be pursued by Thaddeus, who sends him crashing through various buildings as well as a mall, until Billy just manages to escape by reverting back to his kid form and blending in with the other civilians. Sivana, though, soon learns of his secret identity through Freddy, who he saw on the news in footage of him and Billy arguing, and hears now calling Billy's name. So he kidnaps and threatens Freddy to take him to Billy, who's now made it back home, where he's promptly confronted by his foster parents for all his running around and skipping school, while the rest of the kids watch the news and see the same footage Thaddeus saw before, which leads Mary to put 2 and 2 together and realize that Billy is Shazam, which Darla confirms to be true. So the kids approach Billy about this, but he claims he doesn't plan on being a superhero anymore and prepares to run away again. But before he does, the kids reveal that they've tracked down his parents, whose names they've learned are Marilyn and CC Batson, the latter of whom's been in a Florida prison for the last 10 years, while his mom's actually 2 subway stops away. So he rushes off to her location, while Victor and Rosa try to follow after him. But just after they leave, the kids are met at the home by Sivana, who drags Freddy in along with him. Billy, meanwhile, quickly finds his mom within her apartment complex and reveals that he's her lost son. She doesn't seem too thrilled about his arrival though, as it turns out she actually purposely left him that day. She explains that she got pregnant with him when she was only 17 and as a result was kicked out of her home, while his father decided he wanted nothing to do with him, so she was forced to take care of him alone and she struggled with the life of a teen mom. So when they lost each other in the crowd that day, she decided that he'd be better off being raised by someone else, and although she's glad to see he's done well since then, she says now is still not a great time for her. So he leaves, claiming he has to get back to his real family, who he soon learns are in danger when he receives a call from Freddy about Sivana, who he flies back home to confront. And once he's arrived, Thaddeus demands he turn over his powers, and threatens to harm the kids if he doesn't. So he agrees and follows him through a doorway back to the Rock of Eternity, where Sivana then picks up the wizard's staff and surrounds Billy with the 7 deadly sins, who order him to take the staff and say the champion's name. But just then, the other kids show up and launch Freddy's batarang at the back of Thaddeus' head, which surprisingly wounds him, although it closes after the sins re-enter the eye. Still, Billy and the kids are able to escape after Billy launches Thaddeus across the cave, and they attempt to hide from him amongst a crowd within the town's winter carnival. But Sivana follows them there, and after struggling to locate them, just begins attacking everyone in attendance. So Billy's forced to transform back into Shazam, who Sivana then sends Wrath after, while sending the remaining sins after the kids. And once they've been collected, Billy's forced to accept defeat, and he takes hold of the staff. But instead of relinquishing his power, he uses the staff to knock Sivana down, before then having the kids take hold of it and shout Shazam, which grants them each powers just like him. So with their newfound power, they help fight off 6 of the 7 sins, while Billy battles against Dr. Sivana. And Billy, after realizing the only sin left within the eye is envy, attempts to goad envy into coming out, pointing out its inferiority to the other sins. And this actually ends up working, with envy leaping out of Sivana and onto Billy, who then takes it out momentarily with a lightning bolt before collecting Thaddeus, who no longer has any of the sin's power to protect him, and tearing the Eye of Sins out of his head, which allows him to remove the 7 deadly sins from Earth and once again trap them in stone within the Rock of Eternity. With the day saved, the kids return to their normal lives, with Freddy still having to deal with the embarrassment of his superhero best friend not showing up at school like he said he would. He doesn't have to deal with that for long though, as the rest of the kids have arranged for Billy to show up as Shazam and announce to the whole school that Freddy is indeed his best friend, as well as introduce him to his favorite superhero. In a mid-credits scene, we see Thaddeus Sivana in a prison cell in Rock Falls Penitentiary, writing the 7 symbols over and over again along the walls, until he's interrupted by a worm-like creature named Mr. Mind, who informs him that there are other ways to gain magic, and proposes they form an alliance to take over the 7 realms of magic. And in a post-credits scene, we see Billy and Freddy back when they were first testing Billy's powers, as he attempts and fails to speak to fish. And that was our recap of Shazam. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And also, let us know in the comments below where you'd rank Shazam amongst the other films in the DCEU so far. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.